On the face of it, this is a very lopsided comparison. I mean, have a look at some of the numbers. $95,000 for the HSV GTS and a mind-numbing $250,000 for the AMG E63S. But scratch a bit deeper and things start to even up a little bit. They're both four-door sedans. They both run big V8 engines with forced induction, a supercharger for the HSV, twin turbochargers for the German car. They both make 430 kilowatts and they both comfortably get from 0 to 100 kilometers an hour in under 5 seconds. So they're both supercars. Starts to get a bit more interesting at that point, doesn't it? One thing I'm not sure about with the HSV is the interior layout. It's kind of all over the place. The gauges in the center console are pretty much useless because you have to look down and take your eyes off the road for too long to actually focus on them. And the fake carbon fiber, unless it is real, but if it is, they've done a really good job of making it look like plastic. Just doesn't really strike the right note with me. But I do like the engine. I mean, you've got to love a motor that can do what this thing can. It surges right from idle all the way to redline. It makes a pretty good sound too. The gearbox works really well with it. The ratios seem to be spot on, and it does that really cool thing, which the Benz does as well, of sometimes you can still be accelerating quite hard, but the gearbox knows that it's got enough torque to actually shift up a gear, and it feels quite odd, but it's a very cool thing. What I'm not so mad about is the steering feel. For the VF Commodore, on which this car is based, obviously, Holden's gone to an electric power steering system, and I'm not convinced. I remain unconvinced. You can adjust it via the selectable driver modes, and you can adjust everything from the shock absorbers to the bimodal exhaust to the traction control and the stability control. But on none of the settings does the steering ever feel quite right to me, and I think that's the big letdown with the car. There's a little bit of feel on dead ahead, but it's quite hard to knock it off center, and then it just gets heavy, and it's not as good as it probably should be for a car like this. It is the one thing that I really am disappointed in with the whole HSV GTS. Now, as I said, the suspension's adjustable, but it's only the dampers, not the springs. But it does make a fair bit of difference. The only problem is that the only setting that you're really comfortable on is the normal or touring mode. Once you crank it up into sports or performance or track mode, the dampers get really, really firm, and they probably do work very well on a track. But for the road, you're really kidding yourself if you're switching it to sport or track. It's a bit of a waste of time, and all it does is loosens your fillings. There are a few areas on the AMG where you can see where the extra money has been spent, and one of those is the interior. The gauge layout's really classy, and it's kind of more simple than the HSV, or it seems more intuitive to me. For once, the carbon fiber's real, although I should point out that the carbon fiber kit on this car is worth $16,000. I could probably do without it. I think you could too. Now, the engine. This is a powerhouse of an engine. It ran a standing quarter mile today in 12.3 seconds, which is 0.3 of a second faster than the HSV. So obviously they both are supercars, but this just shades the other car. It has a little more torque, 800 Newton meters versus 740. But I do like the way this car steers. It's got that E-Class or that Mercedes-Benz waft factor, but the steering feels a little bit more faithful in terms of what you put in and what you get out. It just seems, again, I'll use the word intuitive again, but that's how it feels to me. The ride's a little bit better than the HSV. When you do crank the dampers up in this car, it does also become very firm, but left on comfort, which is the equivalent of the HSV's touring, this is a little more comfortable over rough bumps, and particularly those little stutter bumps that councillors seem so keen on giving us these days. But the engine itself has got a great exhaust note. It does sound the pick of the two. And it makes a beautiful crackle on the upshifts when you're at full throttle, like on a drag strip. The catch is you can't do that on the street because this thing's got so much urge that you would be locked up for looking like you were having too much fun. And in Europe and the United States, this car is available with four-wheel drive. We don't get it because it hasn't been engineered for right-hand drive yet, and it won't be until the next generation E-Series. So really, that is the car's main downfall, I guess, if you wanted to use it to go to the snow. But I'm here to tell you that the way it steers, I probably prefer that it is two-wheel drive. I don't think it's a bad thing at all that we don't get the all-wheel drive version. When you look at what both these cars do and the way they do it, it soon becomes pretty apparent that price really is the only thing that continues to separate them. Well, price and perception. See, the HSV, even though it is a toned down version of a HSV compared with the last model, it's still a pretty leery looking thing. It's more Carlton and United rather than Moe and Shandon, if you know what I mean. The AMG, on the other hand, well, I've never met anybody who doesn't get an AMG, but I have run across a few people who would rather not be seen in a GTS or a HSV of any sort. But on the basis that as a high-performance sedan, it does pretty much everything the German car does, well, I reckon 155,000 bucks buys a lot of dark glasses and false moustaches.